What's an encounter with a celebrity you've had where they were an absolute dick? Vivica A. Fox. I used to be a bartender at a hotel, and she came in with a guy late one night after an event. He ordered a drink for himself and a house red for her, so I turned to her and asked if she preferred Cab or Merlot. She gave me the dirtiest look, like how dare I address her directly, and flounced off to a table without answering. He said just give her red, whatever, and left a 0 tip. They ordered 4 rounds, no tip each time. They also complained that someone else came in and sat at a table near them and tried to get me to make the move. The other guests didn't even try to approach her or talk or anything, she was just mad that they dared to sit at a neighboring table. On the other end of the spectrum, Jay Leno came down one night to grab some dinner and a drink at the bar by himself. He was super polite, funny, and left me a $100 tip. I gotta say I like Leno. I like Conan too. That NBC mess was mostly NBC's fault. Back in the 90s I worked on a stage musical production of Beauty and the Beast. The guy who played the talking clock is an Australian celebrity by the name of Bert Newton. He always used to say hi and make conversation until he found out I was one of the lighting crew. After that, he wouldn't even glance at me. Slightly related. On the same show, I used to hang out with the dude that played Gaston at stage door having a ciggy during interval. I only recently discovered that it was Hugh Jackman. Really nice dude. Hugh Jackman seems genuinely the nicest person in Hollywood. Sorry Tom, I said it. I love this clip of him recognizing a former student. YouTube webpage. Was the reporter just casually assuming that Jackman wouldn't remember him, and then he does anyway? The reporter was probably thinking, this is Hugh Jackman, why would he remember that he taught me pay when I was a much younger man? He's got to meet thousands of people every year, why would I stick out? Joke's on him, Jackman is amazing. Just play it cool Rolo, be chill, H-E-E-Y-I-T's Rolo, oh my god. Thanks for using back in the 90s. Now I'll have BoJack Horseman theme song stuck in my head for at least 20 minutes. Hugh Jackman booked a private dining event at the restaurant where I work. Apparently when he came in, he was super gregarious and charming, everyone loved him. Would come up to the staff with a huge smile and say, "Hi, I'm Hugh. What's your name?" The man has a golden heart. This is late, but it needs to be said. I was a bookstore worker for a large chain in a popular city. We did a ton of author signings and talks. Authors are almost universally great. George R.R. Martin was fantastic and really insightful to fans' questions. Stephen King is awesome and stays for everyone. Chuck Palahniuk is great, and really hilarious. Toni Morrison stayed and talked in the coffee shop for hours. Margaret Atwood knows more about books and sci-fi than literally anyone I've ever met. However, the shit crown goes to Mitch Albom. He's a colossal dick to everyone. He openly berated the baristas in the cafe for his coffee's lack of quality. He was a prick to every employee. He sat in this super tight t-shirt and sat with his left arm behind his right to try and push out his biceps and look tougher. Which is hilarious, because he's maybe 5 feet 6 and 130 pounds. I'm not going to go as far and say he sexually harassed women, but he was slimy and gross to every woman in sight from ages 1845. It was the worst signing ever. Plus, he acted like Tuesdays with Maury is wisdom on level with the Dalai Lama. My boss actually had to ask him to leave immediately when his scheduled signing was over. His handler agent was a very nice woman who was clearly sick of his shit. That poor lady. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the first few authors without reading about how nice they were, because I always thought they were nice. Good to be wrong. I have met GRRM twice now in work situations and he has always been unfailingly nice. I had my dog with me and he cuddled her and called her the tiniest dire wolf while I did his makeup for a shoot. We got photos of the two together and they are some of my favorite pics. Then he took the whole film crew out to dinner one night just because. OP delivers. Tiniest dire wolf, tiniest dire wolf, Album on Imager webpage. I went to a convention near my town. It was a sort of cartoon convention and gaming convention combo. On 10 separate occasions I was asked, "Do you know who I am?" Not a single one of them were people I knew. When I expressed this, they all had the same responses but with different names. My name is Sprinkle Tim, or some equally ridiculous name, and I have over 50,000 subscribers on YouTube, Twitch. Apparently there was a panel being held about how to grow your internet persona. It drew out some of the worst people ever. I wouldn't even call any of these people celebrities, but that was the image they had in their heads. Jennifer Lopez. Anyone who has had to arrange for her visits or done military protocol for her USO tour or whatever knows how off the walls batshit crazy she is. She came to visit Rammstein a long time ago and the general's quarters, the nicest place on a very nice base, weren't good enough for her because everything has to be white. Every single thing. So we frantically found her a hotel room in Frankfurt 90 minutes away, which was as all white as could be found, and had the pleasure of driving her to from multiple times a day while she nagged about making other cars on the Autobahn slow down, why her hotel was so far, why she couldn't get her favorite American drinks at a rest stop, etc. She expected Pope and presidential level treatment. She is absolutely horrible, so her attitude matches her music. There needs to be a JLO as the worst subreddit. There are too many stories, she sounds like the worst. I was fortunate enough to be involved in a number of films shot in South Africa. I got to meet and greet some well-known celebs, but a few stand out. I will list them in greatest Cockwimble to minor Cockwimble order. 1. Steven Seagal. Absolute bellend. Was looking for hookers while married, coked out of his head while on set, just a general douche canoe. 2. Kiefer Sutherland. Mamma Mia, this guy thought that every time the sun came up it was because he had his pants down to take a shit. Decent enough to the people who directed and mattered to him, everyone else was treated like dirt. 3. Bob Hoskins. Just generally a bit of a prick, lost his shit at people for the littlest things. Rono Mitra was pretty nice though, friendly and congenial and just so very pretty IRL. Leonardo DiCaprio was actually much nicer than I would have expected, took his mom with him wherever he went, was very nice to crew and extras, and pretty much everyone. Great attitude too, and X200E, anyway, that's my 2C. I was sitting in the lounge in one of the big music studios in Hollywood, and Bruno Mars walks up, looks at me, and says, "Where the fuck is my cab?" I looked at him and said, "Who the fuck are you?" I really had no idea who he was, haha. But the dude did act like an absolute dick. Nicest guy ever. Billy Ray Cyrus. The studio had a policy that you're never supposed to touch the food any of the artists order or bring in, and you're especially not supposed to take any home. As I was leaving he slipped me 2 huge meat and cheese trays out the door when no one was looking. As an intern trying to make it as an audio engineer, that sustained me for almost 2 weeks. I like that Billy Ray Cyrus story. I wasn't spring-loaded to expect good things from him, but that was really nice. It's possible that some of your coworkers now go around telling people about the night that Billy Ray Cyrus came to work and ate like 3 of those monster plates all by himself in one night like it was nothing. We left him in his changing room for 5 minutes, I swear. We went back and all the cheese and meat gone. He's a fucking wolf, let me tell ya. Eating that much meat and cheese, no wonder he has an achy breaky heart. Yep. I interned at a big studio in Miami, was then an aspiring audio engineer, fucked edit industry. Florida's manager straight up told me he didn't trust me because I'm white and threatened to fight me regularly. Scott Storch made me go to McDonald's with $3 100 bills. Told me not to come back with change, he wanted equal parts McFillet, cheeseburgers and McChickens. The people at the hood-ass Opelika bad part of Miami, McDonald's wanted to murder me. Took me 4 or 5 trips with their assistants to load my Honda Civic with about 150 sandwiches. So you buy $200 worth of stuff and give them a $100 tip. Everyone happy. I met Bruno 7 years ago after he played his first gig in my city. At the time, my younger brother was a massive Bruno Mars fan and very desperate to meet him, so after the concert when we saw a dark van pull up at a hotel near our house, my mom decided to let us stop and see if it was Bruno. When we got the hotel, there was no Bruno, but only his entourage. My brother expressed his disappointment to the guitarist, who told us to wait 5 minutes while he made a phone call. He then told us to go wait in the lobby, and 2 minutes later, out pops Bruno Mars. He stayed and spoke to us for over 45 minutes, taking photos and asking us if we enjoyed the show, etc. He was the kindest, most real celebrity I've ever met. I've also met Kim Kardashian, Misha Barton, Sienna Miller and a few others. Still to this day, I am a huge Bruno fan and absolutely respect him as a person. Sure, he may not have been the world's biggest celebrity at the time, but he spent a good portion of his night speaking to us when he definitely didn't need to. Probably 10 or 11 years ago, I was working BDS of a WWE house show. My job was to find the contest winners and bring them to introduce them to a couple of the bigger stars. My immediate report went to Ricky Steamboat, who was incredible. I had a question for him, don't remember what it was anymore, but he was standing there talking to Chris Jericho. Not wanting to be rude, I stood to the side, waiting for their conversation to end before I interrupted. Jericho stopped mid-sentence, looked at me and said, "Are you fucking lost?" When Ricky turned around to see who Jericho was talking to, he recognized me and was super pleasant and answered my question, but Jericho was pissed and thought I was a groupie or something. Jericho does say that when he's a heel, he stays in character all the time. Refuses to sign autographs, etc. Then again, maybe he just says that so he can justify being a dick. Hard to imagine why he'd need to keep it kayfabe when backstage, though. Used to work at a Hard Rock hotel. Mariah Carey was the absolute definition of a fucking diva. She used a bunch of employee passageways and we were instructed that if we looked her in the eyes we would get written up. We were also told that we had to immediately vacate any room that she entered, even if we were in the cafeteria on break or in the bathroom doing our business. She's an asshole on top of that too. A few of her backup dancers accused her of sexual assault during Me Too and nothing ever came of it. I've seen the whole can't look them in the eyes thing a few times in similar threads, and it just fucking baffles me someone can be that self-righteous they feel that other people don't have the right to make eye contact with them. Think Dr. Phil may have been another one? Fuck those cunts. Yeah, can anyone elaborate on this? Has anyone elaborated on their motivations for this? Making eye contact is considered by some people a dominant gesture or sign of mutual respect. This is mainly in Western cultures. Some insecure people get offended if you make eye contact with them. Confident and secure people tend to respond in a much more positive manner. I wish her career was destroyed when Eminem dissed her. Too bad she was smart enough to shut up about him from that point on. Met Naomi and Wynonna Judd at a meet and greet session at Kmart corporate headquarters. I had a Kmart store planned from their hometown for them to autograph. Wynonna was a complete uber bitch. She scribbled her name on it and then crunched up the paper and threw it at me with some sarcastic comment about rednecks and hillbillies. Then her mom Naomi took the paper, gently smoothed it out and told me that it was the most thoughtful thing she had autographed all day. Very nice and genuine woman. How are those two blood related? My stepdad either did security for them once or delivered appliances to one of their houses, and your description is spot on. Naomi was sweet as could be, but Wynonna was a demon bitch. Wynonna is jealous of nurses and mom and has weight issues, so her reaction is bitch. My buddy from Nashville was working at an all-you-can-eat buffet. He was at the steak meat area. People would come up and he would slice off some ham or whatever they wanted to put it on their plate. Wynonna Judd comes up and hands him her plate. He puts some ham on it. She nods at him that she wants more. He gives her another slice. She gives him a rude look and says, "Really shitty, I'm eating for two, you know," obviously indicating she was pregnant. My buddy says, Looks like you're eating for 3 at least. He was fired about 10 minutes later. Reversal story. Once worked for a large movie company. I was pissed off at the end of my work day, so when I saw an open elevator not crowded with folk as I was leaving, I quickly got in and pressed my floor number when I heard a thick voice behind me, sounding a bit far away, saying, "Hold the door." I pretended not to hear given shit mood. Annex 200E, doors are closing and I turn. That's when Schwarzenegger's pissed off face appears behind the slit between the ever-closing doors. I asked you to hold the door, then they shut in his face and the elevator went down. I'm so sorry T800. Trying to figure out how someone in the industry wouldn't recognize Schwarzenegger's voice. I'm in the wrong thread, but I have a good guy Mick Jagger story. My dad was a limo driver and often chauffeured celebrity clients. One day he got Mick. The limo got mobbed by screaming fans. They were on all sides, pounding on the glass, climbing on the hood. My dad had never dealt with anything like that and started to panic. Mick reached over the seat from the back, patted my dad on the shoulder and said, "It's all right, mate. Just slowly take your foot off the brake. They'll clear off." Mick Jagger soothed my dad through a panic attack. My so works at the airport and met Mick Jagger there. Says he was polite, but it was also like 4 a.m. so he wasn't very talkative, lol. A drunken Robbie Knievel tried to start a fight with some friends and I at a gas station because he claimed we cut him off. He was belligerent, swearing up a storm, and not entirely coherent. He also punched the gas pump we were at because that's just how upset he was. Our reaction was 80% what the fuck and 20% go home, you're drunk, and eventually he just went from screaming at us to screaming at us from his car. This was a little after his dad had died. Don King. I didn't recognize who he was and asked for his ID so that I could check him into the hotel. When I looked up from the computer screen, the look he was giving me made me turn completely cold. I genuinely thought we were seconds from this guy reaching out and grabbing me to hurt me for daring to not recognize him. I am not a big person and he is a very tall man. Fortunately, a co-worker who did recognize him intervened and took over the transaction, giving him what he felt was the proper amount of ass kissing. After that point, as far as he was concerned, I no longer existed. Super rude, but the anger and malice in his expression when I hadn't recognized him just left me grateful to have him turn his attention away. I think he did say something along the lines of "Don't you know who I am?" but I honestly don't remember it. I just remember the look on his face. I've dealt A-list celebrities and plenty of sports stars who pull the "Don't you know who I am" card all the time, and I'm generally just amused by it. This was something else altogether. He creeped me the fuck out. Well, he is a convicted murderer. And Mike Tyson certainly has no love for him, to put it mildly. Yep. I didn't know that at the time. Coworkers made fun of me for being terrified of him, so I looked him up afterward and was like, see. Crook and murderer. He's probably a sociopath. Your spidey senses were tingling. Giorgio Moroder handed me his credit card when I was working a hotel front desk. He was totally chill that I didn't make a big deal about him being there, but honestly his work is someone's that I really am impressed with, but I was too stunned to say anything. Edit, okay, I had no idea there were so many GM fans in Reddit. What I can confirm is that he was incredibly chill and he was one of those people who seem to have a halo of their own soundtrack around them at all times, even before I realized who he was. I work at a casino and I see quite a few celebrities. Firstly, Kevin James treated just about every employee like they were wasting his time. Just get IT done. JLO was banned from one of the casinos I worked at. Mariah and JLO were both banned from the other. JLO famously told upper management she didn't want poor people looking her in the eyes and wanted any staff that went near her to look down. She also demanded a new mattress in her villa, custom-made bed by the way, at 3 a.m., then tried to get the casino to essentially break into a mattress store she had in a Google for the mattress she wanted them to buy. God, I'm gonna be here all night lol. Oh, one more, Charles Barkley is the worst gambler I've met in my life. That dude couldn't win a hand if he rigged the deck, lol. My sister was at an away wrestling match in SoCal when a guy by himself sat next to her and hardly said a thing the whole time, except cheer for his son. After a while he asked her who she was there to see and she said, without looking at him, that she was there to watch her boyfriend, and as she was going to ask who his son was, she looked at him and saw that it was Nicolas Cage in a ball cap. She was stunned and couldn't talk, and he smiled and basically read her mind, then pointed out his son with a proud dad smile. She got very nervous, so he asked her if she wanted to take a picture with him, for which she said yes. Not sure if Nicolas Cage is a bad person or anything, but this encounter made him seem so regular and grounded, being at a public school to proudly watch his son wrestle. I don't understand how she didn't recognize his voice. He was doing a movie in southern Indiana for one of straight-to-DVD movies about a year ago, and my friend met him in a Toys R Us. Said he was a totally legit dude and was super nice to everyone. I wish I still had the pic he sent me. Hearing him talk about the roles he's played over the years made me realize he's both incredibly dedicated and a bit of a film buff. Gained a lot of respect for him. Great interview. YouTube webpage. I used to be a driver and an assistant for Andrzej Sapkowski, the author of the Witcher series, during a Comic-Con at which he was a guest speaker. The guy is exactly as dickish as described, and complains constantly just about everything. My favorite from him was when he rejected the coffee I brought to him because it wasn't a blue cup. Apparently, coffee only tastes good in brown or white cups. He also confused me at first for Nurgle, of Behemoth, who was a speaker at the same con. Bizarrely, it happened again in my life. By the way, I look nothing like Nurgle, more like Tom Hanks with a ponytail, and X200E. Surprised he didn't try to demand all the money that they made selling coffee in blue cups from you. After all, who could foresee the success of blue coffee cups? Mid-90s. Worked at a golf course that was so exclusive not even Michael Jordan could be a member. The day was very rainy and the course was closed to everyone except the foursome Jordan was in. He ran late, the other three started without him. He arrived, they loaded his clubs on the cart. I was standing probably 50 feet away as he was getting ready to leave and meet his group, no one else around. There was nothing for me to do since no one else was on the course or the driving range. I'm not walking or anything, just kinda marveling at how tall he is. They don't look so tall on TV. He calls me over. How can I help you, Mr. Jordan? Can I have that towel? Of course, sir, thanks, I knew you were good for something nice. For those asking, EGC and Skokie, I wasn't implying he wanted to be a member, just that he wouldn't be allowed because they were racist. Worked in a cinema that hosted premieres, so always dealt with the celebrities during premieres and red carpet events. You really get to know who the dicks are based on how they interact with you. Jennifer Lawrence was by far the worst celebrity I ever encountered. She showed up an hour late because she decided to visit a friend beforehand, so it delayed all of us, then complained about people shouting at her while she was walking the carpet, and then she snapped her high heel while walking down the stairs, and for some reason that was also her fault. Nothing but hostility from that woman. On the other hand, Tom Hanks was the nicest. I always disliked her, something about her just really bugs me. On the other hand, I'm so glad that everyone always says Tom Hanks is nice. I can't stand Jennifer Lawrence, and after hearing her tell the story of how she destroyed those ancient Hawaiian burial sites because she was scratching her ass on it, really made me dislike her. What made that story worse is she told it in front of Chris Pratt, who lived in Hawaii for years. He did not look impressed. Yet, while small celebrities treat us as if we are on their level or are really grateful for us inviting them and being accommodating, she just acted really entitled. Peter Dinklage was really lovely to us whilst he was a complete douche to reporters on the red carpet, not sure why. Kingsman was my most memorable premiere because the whole cast and crew were lovely. Channing Tatum went to the wrong way and nobody noticed, so I somehow ended up having to escort him, and he was so damn nice about it. Probably because reporters are douches themselves. Don't blame him on that one tbh. It's probably that fake ass I'm a totally regular person act that she puts on whenever she's on TV. She destroyed a sacred Hawaiian rock stack by itching her arse on it, then bragged and laughed about it on TV. I wasn't a fan before, but now I detest her outright. Chris Pratt's reaction to that story while he sat next to her was so uncomfortable, you could tell he definitely did not approve. He lived in Hawaii for a while. It seems like Jennifer was the only one who didn't realize he wasn't thrilled with her story of destroying a deeply personal monument and almost killing a member of the crew. Jennifer Lawrence comes across as one of those girls who tries so hard to convince everyone she's goofy and funny and not like other girls, but really she's incredibly self-conscious and high maintenance. Not me, a friend of mine. He worked on Looper in New Orleans. It was a very common occurrence where Bruce Willis would wander off of set, a call would come over the walkie, and various PAs would be sent to scour the area to find him. My buddy found him in a bar, sheepishly approached him, and said, "I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Willis, but they're calling for you on set." Bruce Willis looked up at him and then proceeded to just keep drinking. I think it was a G&T, like he wasn't even there. My buddy had to walk outside, radio in that he had found him, and wait for someone with a higher pay grade to come and wrangle him back to set. Edit, shit, just remembered I have one from set as well. My first movie gig while I was still in college was Crafty PA on Skeleton Key. The rap party was at a bar I went to pretty regularly, the DJ spun awesome soul music, it was just good times. My roommate who got me the job and I showed up to the rap party as soon as it started. We were broke college kids and it was an open bar. We grab a table, load it with tequila shots, our department head shows up, and we proceed to get really hammered and have a good time. About an hour and a half into the party, we get approached by bar security. Apparently Kate Hudson had arrived at the party and she wanted the table 6 of us are sitting at. We protested a bit, but were then told we could get up and stay at our own rap party, or be thrown out of the venue. We choose to just leave our own rap party because it was such a shitty situation. Topher Grace tried to eject me and some friends from a table at some bar in LA. The bartender refused to ask us to move, so he got huffy and left. Having worked with a few famous people, it's very possible that she walked in and said something like, "Aw man, those guys are so lucky they got such a great table," or even just, "Are there any tables left?" I don't really want a booth, and her assistant did the rest. Oftentimes the helpers are the ones okay with being dicks. That happened to a friend of mine. He was a bouncer at a nightclub and Jack Gleason, Joffrey, came by. His security or whatever was an ass and tried to get him in without paying the entrance fee. My friend is stubborn as a mule and refused to give a waiver. Jack realized what was going on though and immediately paid the fee like a gentleman. William Shatner paid for a meet and greet. I fumble for my ticket token to give to the security guy. It literally took 3 seconds of fumbling. He then yells, "Hurry up, will you?" He clearly did not want to be there, took a photo and shoved me aside. Best celebrity was Ron Perlman, was on the same day. A girl in a wheelchair was in front of me. He gets down onto her level and asks her if she is enjoying herself and really gave off the vibe like he gave a shit. He came up to me and firmly shook my hand with a big smile and gave me a one-armed hug and said, "Thanks for coming by." The dude's a saint. Ron Perlman is the fucking best. He's always seemed like an awesome guy, glad to have confirmation. Unfortunately, I only have accounts of celebrities who I or someone I know was a dick to them. When I was about 5 years old, my dad took my brother and I to the Seattle Science Center. A fellow by the name of Kevin Bacon happened to be in line with his wife and kid. My dad attempted to low-key point out to us that it was Kevin Bacon, but subtlety is not a strong suit, so everyone else in the vicinity started to notice. Kevin tried to stay incognito, but too many people were aware of his presence at that point, so he left. "Thanks, Dad." Second time, I was on a flight to San Francisco and Art Alexakis was on the flight. Twitter was kind of new at this point, so I tweeted something along the lines of, "Oh hey, Art Alexa Kiss is gonna be on my flight. Too bad I've never been a fan." When we landed I checked my Twitter and noticed a new follower notification, from Art Alexakis. Art Alexakis is a boss though, I mean, it's passive-aggressive and just so harmless. LOL, I love how you're like this accidental celebrity destroying supervillain. I have an art story too. It was the summer that Santa Monica was getting played on MTV in heavy rotation. They were absolutely huge at that moment. I was maybe 14 or 15. Was hopping on a flight from I think Long Beach to Denver. My mom and I were standing around the gate waiting to be boarded. I recognized them. Was way too shy to say anything, but told my mom who they were. She had a pen, took my book out of my hand and went straight up to them. I was so embarrassed. The whole band looked up at me after my mom held out my book and the pen and they all smiled and waved. I wanted to die. So to this day I have a signed by Everclear copy of Communion by Whitley Strieber, and Art wrote a little smiley face and said to my real name, "Don't be shy. It's one of my most cherished possessions." I've worked on the sets of major films and television shows for the past 4 years. I would like to share a different perspective, if I may. When a show film has a cast with a fan base, those fans show up to on-location filming. On some shows that have well-known reoccurring locations, there are often many fans that will show up to set. The locations team does their best to corral them into a single location that is out of camera but close enough that they don't try to sneak around and become security risks. Many times, the cast members will take the time to come over to the group of fans and take pictures, shake hands, sign autographs. I'll begin with the things that people say. There is always a few birthdays in the crowd because it's my birthday demands attention. There's always someone who traveled from a different country just to be there. A bunch of people bring fan art and random gifts. Sometimes someone missed a cancer treatment or a funeral or any other number of things that are an attempt to garner sympathy. Now I may sound cold, but who are any of those people to put that kind of baggage on a stranger? And all at once, no less? Having stood there and listened to the fans bark out their ailments and woes in an attempt to have the ear of their crush, it's a pathetic sight and it must weigh on those actors. When Justin Bieber announced that he was no longer doing meet and greets with fans while touring, I agreed with the little shit. Now, the things that people do. Remember a couple years ago there was a news story out of Argentina about the baby dolphins being killed by tourists who had captured them and then passed them around to take selfies? That's what comes to mind when I see our cast with a giant group of fans. They've got security and still they've been surrounded. People get grabby. People push forward. People are determined to get their damn selfie. People feel some misplaced sense of entitlement. And the actor has to keep a straight face because mixed in with the press of fans are perhaps waiting to snap a nasty moment. There are reasons people want to be left alone, and actors are people at the end of the day. Thanks for writing this. I work with celebrities regularly and know a couple. Threads like this make me sad. If Johnny Nobody has a bad day and snaps at some woman and her annoying kids in the supermarket line, it's a 2-minute problem. If the person is famous, it's suddenly their defining character flaw. The sense of entitlement I see in this thread towards other people who happen to be famous would be laughable if it wasn't so insidious. Along the same lines, when I was younger I was in a death metal band and we played with lots of bigger bands. 99% of the people in the bands and their crews were amazing. One night we played with Cannibal Corpse, and I actually got to hang out with George Fisher, the vocalist. Super nice guy through and through. He took a few minutes and called his family, telling his kids good night and loves them. This fan that was somehow in the band area and back just starts screaming at him. I try to tell the guy to knock it off, he's on the phone with his kids. This guy starts yelling inappropriate things for a kid to hear, thinking he's being funny. George looks pissed. I kind of grabbed the guy and pushed towards the security guys and told them to get him out of there. I only meant to push him back to the main area but they threw the guy out altogether. George thanked me but he was annoyed and went to be alone afterwards. I met Jeffrey Rush when I was working reception at a small hotel when he was filming The Daughter. I lent him my umbrella and recommended a cafe in town. Rather than catch the bus right outside, he decided to walk the 45 minutes into town. He came back and blew me a kiss as I returned my umbrella and said he liked the cafe. Reminded me of my late grandfather. He can rock a pink business shirt. You bastard, I was prematurely devastated that I was about to hear he was horrible. Not my story, but my brother told me this happened to his friend in high school. She went to go see John Mayer live and she was super hyped because she'd opted for the VIP tickets that let you meet him after the concert. After the concert and waiting for the time to meet him, John Mayer came out of his room only to say, "If you're not gonna sleep with me, you may as well just go." Real classy fellow, that John Mayer. John Mayer is pretty publicly scuzzy to women, at least. Doesn't surprise me that he said this. Was an extra in a comedy sketch with David Walliams and Jack Whitehall. Jack's great, but David. They were playing these stuck-up tennis personalities and I, aged 19, was David's ball girl. During one take, he clicked his fingers and beckons me to bring his towel to him. I do so, quickly, as instructed. He wipes his brow and pretty aggressively thrusts the towel back to me. I was unprepared and dropped the thing. He tuss and we cut, try to do the scene again. Same happens, he clicks, I run over, but this time he wipes his sweaty arse in tight shorts as well as his forehead and then throws the towel back to me, higher this time so it's platted right over my head. I got David Walliams but sweat on my face. He never came over to apologize, never said a single word to any of us extras despite there being very few of us. Honestly, the rudest experience I've had with a celebrity in 5 years of film TV work. I lived in a house right across from David Walliams in 2013, and my roommate and I happened to be watching the street out our open window when we saw him come home late at night and find he was locked out. We watched him pat his pockets for keys, check under the mat, try his doorbell, try his phone, the whole shebang, and we lost our minds laughing at him. At one point he heard us and turned all around trying to figure out who was laughing at him on an empty London street at 1 a.m., which of course made us laugh harder but more secretly. Just wanted to share because it sounds like he was a huge ass to you, and I want you to know that he was once mysteriously ridiculed. My heart sank when I read Jack Whitehall. I'm glad to hear he's genuinely a nice guy. Alec Baldwin. Oh, how I now despise that man. Back in 2002, I was at an event for work and he was a special guest. He appeared to be somewhat intoxicated, and as he walked past me, he plowed into me, spilling my entire drink down the front of my outfit. Never said excuse me or I'm sorry or anything. Just was a total douchebag, and to this day I will not watch anything if I know he'll be in it. So yeah, I still hold a grudge. My dad has reoccurring nightmares where he fights Alec Baldwin to the death. He despises him as well. Not bad, just a sweet story if you love Sheryl Crow. She came to perform at my hometown casino. It was summer break, so she had her children with her on her tour bus. It was the day of her show and she took her kids out for a bicycle ride. They were riding all over the place to find public access to the lake, so she stopped some random guy cutting his lawn to ask for directions. He had no idea who she was. His house was on the lake and he invited her and her kids to use his property. It was a hot day and she obliged. His wife came outside after seeing the kids playing and brought watermelon and drinks for them, still not knowing who she was. Sheryl hung out at this couple's house for hours. The guy took her kids fishing out on his boat and Sheryl hung back with the wife just shooting the shit in a Muskoka chair. When she went to leave, she asked for their phone number and told them they would be getting a call shortly. Phone rang about an hour later. It was the casino letting them know that they had front row tickets to her show. I was sitting right behind this couple at her show that night. She shared the story with the crowd and made the couple raise their hands. They were so embarrassed. About 65-70 years old, cutest couple ever. She invited them backstage after the show and they got some really good pictures. I have a good story about celeb that might even up the score. My sister met Jack Whitehall, Freddie Flintoff and Jamie Redknapp in Miami airport as we were both flying home to the UK. I'm going to assume they had just finished filming, as I know they are in a TV program together in the UK that's super popular. My sister approached Jack as she was a fan, and the other two bantered with her as she didn't know Freddie or Jamie. She's not a sports fan. They laughed and bantered back and forth about it, and they took it like champs and took selfies on her phone and Snapchat mucking around, and without her even asking, they all signed her plane ticket. She felt really starstruck about it all, but they were so nice to her and genuine. She now has a crush on Jamie and wants to get into football and cricket. Jack Whitehall even asked how our trip was and high-fived my sister when she said Harry Potter World was her favorite part. They all bundle-hugged her before they went to catch their flight. All in all, they gave my little sister their undivided attention for 30 minutes and just made her feel special. It was so great, and I'll always love them for doing that for her, and they all gained a lifelong fan in my sister. Once upon a time when I was a small military brat, my father volunteered backstage at a Uzo show. At this particular Uzo show, Jennifer Lopez was performing. I was about 11 and I was absolutely obsessed with her and her music. Since my dad worked backstage, he was able to get me a pass to go back and meet her. Before the show started, my dad took me backstage and told me to stand over by the stage entrance. I stood there for a hot minute and then I saw her walk by. I waited until she was near me and I mustered all the bravery I had to ask her to sign my, now very sweaty, composition notebook I had been monkey gripping. She looked at me like she just saw a dog vomit then eat it, said nothing, and then just walked away. To this day, whenever she is brought up, which isn't really often now, because she's so extraordinarily irrelevant, I am 100% obligated to bring up what bitch she is. Warped Tour, in like 2009 or so, out in Cleveland. My friend and I knew one of the roadies for Joan Jett and the Blackhearts and he got us VIP. About 30 minutes after their set we were hanging out backstage and bullshitting with our friend and some of the band members. Joan comes up, I'm thinking holy shit. It's Joan Jett. She's an icon. This is so fucking amazing. She doesn't acknowledge us in any way. Starts talking to her band about an after-party they're supposed to go to. Then with a dismissive gesture of her head, still not even so much as looking at us, she says, "Oh, and your little groupie sluts aren't invited," and walks away. I was flabbergasted. We wouldn't have ever assumed we were. Totally ruined chunks of my childhood looking up to a strong, badass female artist in a male-dominated era and genre. TLDR met Joan Jett backstage at a show, she called me and a friend sluts. Pat Benetter was always better anyway. In the late 80s I was in a bar in DC called The Fifth Column, it's gone now. It was late, close to 2, and I was at the bar trying to pay my tab. This dude sort of jostled me as he tried to get a bartender's attention. It was Mickey Rourke. The woman next to him did a double take and said, "You're Mickey Rourke." Wow, or words to that effect. He glared at her and ordered a drink. About 30 seconds later the bouncers came over and escorted the woman, me, and a couple of others out of the bar, saying we had bothered Mr. Rourke. And of course, I had already paid my tab. For some reason that doesn't surprise me. He honestly just looks like he'd be unpleasant. Sorta my fault, but I met a well-known gay Brit celeb in a gay bar. I was there because a girl I had a crush on and who had just had a bit of a breakup wanted to go with a drink, without being hassled by men. She didn't know that I fancied her, but anyway I offered to take her, as a friend, out for a drink or two, and she said she wanted to go to a well-known gay bar in town. Anyway, this celeb came into the place, and she got all excited and asked him for autograph and photos and was generally being a little bit of a nuisance to him. Sure, he just wanted to have a drink without this, but he was cool about it. I was totally drunk at this point, and wanted to thank him for being cool about it, so I, a straight guy, went up to well-known gay celeb in a gay bar and asked if I could buy him a drink. He just looked down at his nose at me, disgusted, and said, "I don't think so." I sat next to Julius Dr. J. Irving at the Bucks 76ers Eastern Conference Finals years back. I couldn't believe what an asshole he was to kids asking for his autograph or for a photo. Telling kids to get lost or to just leave him alone. No smiles, no warmth, just an asshole. Wes Studi came into a cafe that I waited tables at. I served him and he was pretty rude and pushy. He got really upset at some people that recognized him and asked for a photo. He then demanded to be comped for the inconvenience. He was with Russell Means, who was very nice and ended up paying for everything and tipping very well, so it wasn't a total loss. I just didn't understand why Mr. Studi was so pissed from the second he sat down. Not my story, but I had a boss that said he saw Samuel L. Jackson on the street smoking a cig and he approached him totally uninvited and wanted to talk. He then proceeded to ask him to put the cig out because it offended him and he wouldn't do it. He presented the story like he was in the right. I've never had occasion to put this out there and wonder what others think. I think my boss was an asshole of the highest order and also totally full of shit. I kind of hope Samuel L. Jackson see this. We all think that dude was a dick. I was at a Comic-Con event years ago and in line at the bar behind Matt Smith, Doctor Who. Dude was plastered and got all up in the bartender's face, threatening to get her fired because she had the audacity to ask for ID. The entire time he was demanding to get served drinks, and she should know who he is, and his friend ran the whole thing, etc., etc. She clearly was just following company policy and wouldn't relent, needing to see ID. After like 5 minutes of verbal berating, she was on the verge of tears, and a co-worker had to swap with her to deal with him. Not a good look, Doc. Went to Gen Con a few years ago and Will Wheaton was right behind my husband and I'd had a huge crush on him as a young girl and looked up to him. I turned around and asked if he minded if I snapped a quick photo. He pretended that I never spoke. His wife gave me these sad eyes and then his fucking lackeys explained that he doesn't talk to fans. Well, fuck you too, dude. You could have spoken to me. We were 3 feet apart. Now I can't watch any episodes or movies he is in. It kills it for me. I see his true nature. I never said anything mean. I respected his personal space. And walked away after being told no. I didn't force an over-the-shoulder selfie either. I've heard from many people that Will Wheaton is a dick. I'm sorry you had such a bad experience. Shit, now I truly understand that Sheldon had a good reason to make him his arch nemesis. That sucks. He's built such a persona as a regular geek, kind and approachable. It's a shame to hear it's all a character. I'll be honest, I'm kinda not surprised. It's weird, I've never been a part of the Shut Up Wesley crowd, and I used to really love Acquisitions Inc. and his board game show, but in the past few months my position on him has changed and I'm not sure why. Maybe it was the whole Chris Hardwick thing? This was quite literally me asking for it. I was in an elevator with Joan Rivers, and I told her I am an amateur comic, and nothing would make me happier than her roasting me the rest of the elevator ride. She smiled at me and said that she was surprised the elevator wasn't headed towards the basement considering my fat ass, and that the last time she smelled someone that bad was when she was washing dog shit off her heels. I was so thrilled I practically kissed her. Here's a solid tip for everyone: when you see a celebrity, leave them alone. Give a nod, if you must. Just leave it at that. You don't know them, you only recognize them. Celebrity does this weird mindfuck to us because we usually know someone we recognize. Imagine having strangers all day long want to stop you from your task, or whatever you're doing. It would be maddening. On the other hand, the ones that enter a room with demands, get the fuck out of here with that nonsense. Here's a piece of advice for them. You're not important, you're just a stranger that I recognize. The nod thing. James Spader was standing next to me at LAX baggage claim. I looked at him. He looked at me. We smiled. And that was that. Grew up in West LA. Can confirm, treat celebs like everyone else. They know that you know who they are. Leave them to their business and you stand a better chance of getting a great story, rather than fodder for this thread. I saw one of the main actors from The Office at a restaurant a few months ago. His group was in the furthest back, darkest corner of the whole place. It seemed intentional. There were tons of empty tables much closer to the entrance. It got me thinking, if you don't want to interact with strangers, if you don't want to be the center of attention, but you don't want to disappoint your fans, what do you do? The whole thing made me sympathize with celebrities in a way I hadn't previously. Saw Richard Simmons at Toronto Airport back in 2011. Mary Murphy was there too, not sure if they were traveling together. This caused a small crowd around them in the baggage claim area. One woman tried to talk to Richard. She was quite excited and really wanted to chat with him. She said nothing to provoke what he said. The immediate words out of his mouth were, "You know, just because it's an all-you-can-eat restaurant, doesn't mean you have to eat it all." Everyone was pretty shocked. She was a little bigger than average, but nothing to suggest she drives restaurants out of business. I waited on Richard Simmons once before he disappeared and his emotions were all over the place. He was laughing, then crying, then happy, then giving me life advice. He tipped me $100 on a $100 tab. Overall, thought he was pretty cool in person but definitely some heavy emotional issues going on. I saw Richard Simmons at the Charlotte airport around a seating area around 15 years ago and some lady pulled out her phone so she could have him talk to one of her family members. He got on her phone and was saying stuff like, "Are you staying off the sweets?" I worked in a convenience store deli about 8 years ago. I was taking a piss in the employee bathroom, only 2 of us were working and I told my coworker where I was going so he knew I was in there, and bam, Marja walked in on me, super weird. Then after I finished I was ringing him and his friends out. He took a pickle out of the barrel, took a bite and put it back. Then he told Rock to buy him cigarettes and left. Rock bought 10 packs of Marlboro Lights and left. This sounds like a pretty tame encounter from what I guess about that guy. I once interviewed Chris Wolstenholme, the bass player from Muse, for a radio interview and he answered every question with one word. So what are most looking forward to fans hearing on the new album? The songs? Any particular song? No. That kind of thing. Edit, as some have pointed out, Chris doesn't usually do interviews for Muse, and may also suffer from social anxiety. I have not looked into this claim. The interview I did was one of those banal pre-release hype interviews, so maybe me, or the station I was working for, were at fault. Who knows? All I know is I talked to the bass player from Muse, and, as a bass player myself, was excited then disappointed that he didn't seem to want to talk. I have read somewhere that he has severe anxiety and that's why he rarely does interviews. I saw a live interview with AskReddit and they were the same way, just social anxiety. Then they played music and looked so much happier, less unhappy. Some people just want to play music. E.g. Daft Punk. I'm a pretty big Muse fan and I think Chris is just a quiet guy. However, he could have thrown you a bone at least. When I was in elementary school, we would do this charity event called Jump Rope for Heart, earning money for kids with cancer and illnesses. When I was in 4th grade, we got told that one of the Red Sox players was coming to see us. Nomar Garciaparra. I'm not a sports person, but it was exciting regardless. He was supposed to come, jump with us, give a little speech and present us with a check for the event. All day everyone busted their butts, doing all these activities to raise money for charity, no sign of the guy. He was massively late, didn't do anything with us kids, hastily gave a giant check to us and, to make it up to everyone, gave the parents and adults expired Dunkin' Donuts coupons before leaving. He was there for, maybe a half hour at the very end of the school day, way after the events were over. So about 10 years ago, after the bars closed in Orlando, I was dropping some friends at their extended stay hotel. After dragging them to their room, I decided for whatever reason to take the interior stairway instead of the elevator to get back to my car. As I get to the bottom of the stairs and I'm about to open the door outside, someone coming in opens it and there is Dustin Diamond looking me right in my face. As this was quite a random encounter, the only thing in my surprise that I managed to do is stutter a screech. Dustin Diamond looks me up and down, then looks me in the eye almost yelling, "Who the fuck are you?" He then proceeds to walk past me and pushing me aside with quite a lot of force. I don't think I have ever been as bewildered in my life than after that. Edit, a word. I met Amy Schumer at a hotel bar. The bar was crowded, and I had no idea it was dominated by her and her friends. I sat down next to one of her people, and ordered. Amy leaned over her friend and says, "What exactly makes you think you should be here?" I shrugged and said the open seat was my first hint. She looked so insulted, and her friend who I was next to gasped. The bartender goes to put my drink on the bar for me, and Amy puts her meaty hand on his arm and is like, "No, don't serve this asshole, he needs to go." Some dude in a black polo came over and said that I was bothering Miss Schumer, and needed to leave. I told him I had no idea who this lady was. At the time I had never heard of her and her stolen jokes. He grabbed me by my shirt collar with one hand, and gave me the whole macho easy way, or the hard way bit. I told him that that line sounded good coming from Stallone, but not from him. Amy then screams, "Just get the fuck out," so I beat feet. I didn't see any reserved sign on the bar, and I wasn't trying to chat up her friend. Fucking weirdo bitch. I just wanted a couple whiskeys. Edit, so someone sent me a death threat because I badmouthed a big mouth. Look, I'm a small-time comedy writer who makes money off of quick comebacks. My jokes with Miss Schumer and the security guard were candid and disrespectful, yes, but they come naturally to me after doing this for so long, and they were a reaction to her rude behavior. Also, thank you so much to the user who gave me gold. Much love. You probably could have just put "I met Amy Schumer," that's a tragedy in itself. Aziz Ansari by far. I worked in the only 5-star hotel, at the time, in my city, and he came up to check himself in, which I thought was pretty cool in the moment, but then proceeded to not answer any question I asked that was part of the normal check-in process. Like not even acknowledge that I was asking him things. His girlfriend, at the time, who was an incredible chef, then took over and did the process. Okay, fine, totally cool with me, she was sweet the whole stay. We have to shut down our lobby for filming for his show, not a big deal, it happened all of the time. Aziz and his posse come back tanked and screaming in the lobby that is all marble, so it's loud to say the least. A sweet lady, late 50s, from his filming crew, who's getting a table set up for his filming in the morning, comes over and goes on this heart-wrenching speech about her and her formerly estranged son and how they've reconciled in the last few months because of his character on Parks and Rec, and that his role was a huge factor in them now rebuilding a relationship. She finally asks, "Hey, can you sign this napkin for him and take a picture with me, because he's going to think I'm so cool," and he swipes the napkin from her hands, throws it on the ground, and goes, "I don't do autographs or pictures, but tell him I said hi," and then walks 3 feet away from her and sits on the couch. Like, I totally get not wanting to be bothered when you're doing your day-to-day, or even maybe in that moment, but what a shitty fucking response to some mom who's trying to be sweet for their kid. So many different ways to respond. Also, you're not even an A-list celebrity, get bent. Only tangentially related, but this reminds me of the fantastic short story Cookies from Douglas Adams, this actually did happen to a real person, and the real person is me. I had gone to catch a train. This was April 1976, in Cambridge, UK. I was a bit early for the train. I'd gotten the time of the train wrong. I went to get myself a newspaper to do the crossword, and a cup of coffee and a packet of cookies. I went and sat at a table. I want you to picture the scene. It's very important that you get this very clear in your mind. Here's the table, newspaper, cup of coffee, packet of cookies. There's a guy sitting opposite me, perfectly ordinary looking guy wearing a business suit, carrying a briefcase. It didn't look like he was going to do anything weird. What he did was this: he suddenly leaned across, picked up the packet of cookies, tore it open, took one out, and ate it. Now this, I have to say, is the sort of thing the British are very bad at dealing with. There's nothing in our background, upbringing, or education that teaches you how to deal with someone who in broad daylight has just stolen your cookies. You know what would happen if this had been South Central Los Angeles? There would have very quickly been gunfire, helicopters coming in, CNN, you know, but in the end, I did what any red-blooded Englishman would do, I ignored it. And I stared at the newspaper, took a sip of coffee, tried to do a clue in the newspaper, couldn't do anything, and thought, what am I going to do? In the end I thought nothing for it, I'll just have to go for it, and I tried very hard not to notice the fact that the packet was already mysteriously opened. I took out a cookie for myself. I thought, that settled him. But it hadn't, because a moment or two later he did it again. He took another cookie. Having not mentioned it the first time, it was somehow even harder to raise the subject the second time around. Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice, I mean, it doesn't really work. We went through the whole packet like this. When I say the whole packet, I mean there were only about 8 cookies, but it felt like a lifetime. He took one, I took one, he took one, I took one. Finally, when we got to the end, he stood up and walked away. Well, we exchanged meaningful looks, then he walked away, and I breathed a sigh of relief and streaked back. A moment or two later the train was coming in, so I tossed back the rest of my coffee, stood up, picked up the newspaper, and underneath the newspaper were my cookies. The thing I like particularly about this story is the sensation that somewhere in England there has been wandering around for the last quarter century a perfectly ordinary guy who's had the same exact story, only he doesn't have the punchline. My Bill Murray story. TLDR, I was drunk at a house party and Bill Murray helped me phone a friend to get home. He gave me a pep talk, made me realize my friends were shitty, and I was drinking way too much. He didn't leave until my friend showed up. Nicest guy I ever met. I was at a house party in South Philly while in my undergraduate pen. I get there around midnight and everyone was already hammered. My friends proceed to duct tape 2 40s to my hands to help me catch up. So I'm wandering around this 3-story brownstone drunk as a skunk and asking people to take the 40s off my hands while I was laughing hysterically. I then turn into the front living room and proclaim, I am Edward 40 Hands and I don't wanna be. Will someone help me get these things off? Laughter. Well, I'll help the young lady out, says an old dude on the couch. He was just sitting there drinking a Coke. No one was paying him any attention. I just kinda looked at him, thinking I was insane. There is no way Bill fucking Murray is at this party. So I stare at him a second. I raise my eyebrow, he raises his. He's disheveled looking. Wild hair, old jeans, and some sunglasses which he was wearing at night by the way. I sway my way over and plop my butt on the coffee table opposite of him, hand held up hands. He proceeded to take the tape off and asks me who did this. I said my friend sheepishly. Well, they don't seem like really nice friends. Do you have someone to take you home? I said I did and I called my friend Mike right there and he agreed to pick me up. We chatted for about 20 minutes or so. I don't remember much of the conversation. But one thing did stick. You're a smart girl, you shouldn't be around people like this. Mike showed up and I told Mr. Murray thank you as Mike helped me to my feet. Mike said thanks and Bill quipped something sassy and smiled. As Mike and I were sitting in the car, Mike just kinda sat there for a bit. Roz, was that old guy Bill fucking Murray? He blurted out. I said yup, threw up, and passed out. Bill, I stopped drinking like I was because you connected with me. You were right, those people were not my friends and they were toxic. So I decided to get my life back in order. I'm now going to medical school. Thanks Mr. Murray. 3. I'd rather focus on the positive and tell you about people that surprised me. I worked on a 3-day pickup on the movie Extract with Ben Affleck, Jason Bateman and Mila Kunis. At this point in my career, these are the biggest stars I'd worked with. I was pretty used to most celebs eating lunch in their trailers, which is why I was so surprised that all 3 of these pretty big stars chose to eat with the crew. They were all super humble and just listened to people's funny stories and riffing on each other. Jason Bateman had a really bad black eye, makeup, So to have him, Daredevil and Jackie from that '70s show sitting across from me and listening to my asinine conversations with the camera department was a truly surreal moment. A woman I know swears that when she was staff at a restaurant some years ago, Ted Turner came in with Jane Fonda on his arm just as they're closing and demands she keep it open an extra hour or two for them. When she explained she couldn't, he retorted with that classic angry, "Do you know who I am?" She said the manager, whom I did know and who was a wonderful guy, walked up with the classic line of shouting out loudly to all the customers, "Sorry to bother you people, but just in case anyone can help, we have someone here who does not know who he is." She said he just stomped off in a huff. Other people probably recognized him and just laughed. People where she worked see enough celebrities that they don't give them special treatment. Edit, should have added on the other end of the spectrum, Mr. Rogers in life was the real deal and then some. I had the chance to chat with him once when he was on an offsite shoot for about 10 minutes, and he was every bit the nice guy off camera-ism. He even got my address from the camera crew and wrote me a good wishes note. Ain't selling that autograph. I used to work at the Indiana Jones stunt show at Disney World, so I've seen a good handful of celebrities coming with a VIP tour guide. They've all been great experiences, except for one, Jack Black. As I walked them to our VIP section, his entire group was being loud and obnoxious, jumping over ropes and bleacher seats, which we normally yell at guests for doing, but I took one look at their tour guide who looked miserable and said nothing. After the show, he got a big group picture with the cast of the show, and his group stayed in the empty theater for a couple minutes. After we finished cleaning up, all of us theater ops people stayed around low-key hoping he'd get a picture with us too. Instead, he walked right past us making direct eye contact and said, "What, are you guys expecting something?" and they left. We thought he was joking, but there a definite nastiness to the way he said it. Definitely not as bad as other stuff in this thread, but it's just always rubbed me the wrong way. Why you gotta ruin Jack Black for me like this? Side note, I work at Disneyland and in my entire time working there, over a year, I've only seen a single celebrity that I recognize, Chris Angel. Apparently some huge stars have been around and I've just barely missed them. Weird, I met him once and he was so nice. Tenacious D was playing a show in town and I was at work when I heard he was at the drugstore next door. I desperately wanted to meet him, so I popped over. I saw him across the store and made my way over, when I realized he had a ton of cold medicine in his hands and looked like shit. I didn't want to bother a sick man, so I kinda froze and stared at him for a second before pretending to be picking out ibuprofen. He walked past and I just gave him a smile. He stopped to ask if I was going to the show, and when I told him I had to work all night, he told me fuck that, just leave and come to the show. Paramore, working at a restaurant, the band came in and the hostess had a panic attack, completely starstruck. This was in New Mexico a few years back. Hostess finds me and says she wants to take a picture with them, but doesn't have the confidence to ask. I say I'll go ask, and proceed to do so. The band at their table obliges, and I head back to the hostess to say go. They said okay, and as hostess heads over, the band fucking elopes the tables, leaves, and breaks hostess's heart. I've talked shit about them ever since. At Caesar's late one night we wanted fish and chips from the Gordon Ramsay pub, so we walked in to see if they were still serving. Rod Stewart was sitting there and we had to walk past him to speak to the bartender. As the two of us passed by, his security guy stood up to block us or something. He said no autographs, and I replied cool, we didn't want one but thanks, a preemptive no? LOL, I don't give a shit about Rod Stewart or any other celebrity for that matter. I refuse to acknowledge them any differently than anyone else. We found out the kitchen was closed and that was the disappointment. Billy Joe Armstrong from Green Day once spat on me at a gig. Saw them just before Dookie in a small venue. He was totally cool though, he spat on everyone to be fair, just being punk rock and all that, spitting into the air whilst playing. I hawked up a nice one and spat back and thought it fell short, but after the song ended he pointed at me and said you, with angry look on his face. He then smiled a huge smile and lifted up his foot and said you got me on the shoe. My spit dripping from his Vans. They then played Disappearing Boy, which was the main reason I went to that gig. One of my favorite moments ever. Not me but my parents. They ran into Joaquin Phoenix, when he was in the area for signs I guess, while walking their dog. He might have been walking a dog of his own. Can't remember now. They said he was a shit sack. Also Terrence Howard has a condo in Lafayette Hill, Pennsylvania. I used to live above him. I never even knew it when I lived there, never even knew who he was, but my parents ran into him a few times, and said he was a stuck-up guy every time. Joaquin Phoenix is a notorious weirdo. Method actors are very, very strange. Pretty sure they said he was nasty. Like angry they were passing him on the trail. I'll ask my mom when she's back from vacation. I'll ask my dad when I snag another Ouija board. I was in Arizona for a college soccer tournament, and we were sitting in the lobby of our hotel before we left for our first game. Gary Busey walks into the hotel and I guess I was just staring that direction while I waited to get on the bus. He thought I was staring at him and said, "If you like it so much, why don't you take a fucking picture?" The lady from the front desk immediately came running over and apologized, and said he'd been awful to everyone and had even ripped his phone out of the wall after he had been kicked out of the strip club the night before. I didn't know who he was, and I'm a dumb college student. So I immediately ran into the hallway to see what room he went into. Then I grabbed a hotel phone in a different area of the first floor, and called the front desk. I had only heard his voice once, but Gary Busey has a pretty distinctive cadence. So I put on my best Busey impression and thought WTH, I said, "This is Gary Busey in room 126. I just walked in but didn't want to deal with talking to your face again. My fucking phone is still broken, and here I am using the fucking common people's phone. I expect my phone fixed by 6 p.m. tonight, so I can receive a wake-up call at 1 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m., and 7 a.m. in order to take my medication. Did you get that, sweetheart?" Thank I for nothing. I thought, surely this doesn't work, but why not, and went and got on the bus and told like 2 teammates. The next day our coach made us be at breakfast at 7 a.m. because we had an early game. We're sitting there half awake, eating, when Gary Busey, whose hair is literally pointing straight up in every direction, storms up to the front desk. He slams his hands on the counter and yells, "I do not take medicine." The new girl at the front desk looked right at him and replied, "Maybe that's the problem." I have never laughed so hard, but been so afraid at the same time. And even after I think about it and laugh, the fear still remains. I watched Entourage recently, and they could not have depicted him more accurately. Except maybe angrier. My dad used to work as a valet for Lowry's in downtown Chicago. Some pretty well-known football player came in about 15 minutes before closing with a group of friends. He made them reopen the kitchen, so they could all have steaks. Then they stayed for almost 2 hours after close, being really loud and obnoxious and rude to most of the staff. He also tipped everyone horribly, especially considering everyone had to stay later because of him. In contrast to this guy, there was another NFL player that came in that was not as famous. He was extremely kind to everyone and tipped amazingly. He didn't drive there, so there was no car for my dad to get, but he asked my dad if he could hail him a cab, and when he did he gave him $100 just for that. He also got to meet Ozzy Osbourne working there and said he was an extremely cool guy, but he could not understand a word he said. Well, I am. We had some serious VIPs in our private dining room on this night. Mr. I Am and his posse were downstairs, not welcome with the pop royalty we had upstairs. Him and his friends forced me and the bartender to serve them after the legal hours, referring to us as the help and chuckling amongst themselves. My manager supported this. After I can finally start closing the bar, I have to listen to an hour of this asshole talk shit about me and my fellow staff. Where is the love, sir? Where is the love? Lou Ferrigno tried to charge me $20 to take a picture with a rubber duck for my friend who was in the military. He then tried to talk shit to me about taking baths with the rubber duck. I've since run into him a few times while working. Nobody told me he had surgery to repair his hearing. I'm sure when I was telling everybody how big of a piece of shit he wasn't pleased. As he tried to shoulder check me as he walked past. The dude is the biggest asshole I've met while working with celebrities. Check out Pumping Iron. It's a documentary from the 70s about bodybuilding. There's a scene where a young Schwarzenegger mentally messes with an even younger Lou. It's awesome. Rob Riggle, him and I are fraternity brothers, from different generations. He would come to town and do events. He sometimes stops by the house. I was walking through the foyer when he was there, and I introduced myself. I said I liked his movies, and asked him what he thought of Will Ferrell. Overall a pretty cool dude, and said Will was genuinely funny all the time. He plays an asshole in some of his movies. Obligatory they were dicks. One Direction was doing a signing at my local mall when I was in high school. Being a 15-year-old guy I wasn't really a fan and didn't know what any of them looked like because I never really paid attention to anything they did. Shortly before their signing was supposed to start, two of them went to grab coffee at the Starbucks in the mall. Pretty sure one of them was Niall Horan, but I'm not totally positive. Anyway, they were in front of my mom and I in line and it was extremely awkward because all of the employees were starstruck and then there's my mom and I completely ignorant to what was going on, lol. Anyway, they ordered their coffees and waited like everyone else. None of the other patrons knew who they were either, it seemed like, so here I was just standing next to two A-list celebrities waiting for coffee. They got theirs first and walked out, and the girl who gave us our drinks was freaking out, so I asked who they were and I was shocked when she told me. I found a new appreciation for those guys that day because they were literally superstars at that point and acted like totally average Joes. It was pretty fucking cool. My uncle told me that he and a friend saw Vince Vaughn at a restaurant in Vegas. Apparently they wigged him over and after a minute or so, Vince asked my uncle for one of his French fries. My uncle said sure. And during the course of their 10-minute interaction, Vince Vaughn kept eating my uncle's French fries. Could my uncle have liked me? Absolutely. But something about the image of Vince Vaughn sitting at some dude's table and asking for a fry and proceeding to eat a bunch of them just seems way too fitting to be a lie. Apparently, my dad was on a plane from the US back to the EU. He was in first class, and a woman approached him. She asked him if he would mind switching spots with her friend because she was in econ. My father said no like most people would, and then says, "Don't you know WHOIAM?" My father said no, and asked the flight attendant. The flight attendant replies by saying that her name was Rihanna, and that she was a kids entertainer, and X200E. P.S. This is before she was famous if you couldn't tell. When I was diagnosed with my brain cancer, my prognosis was 2 to 5 years. I downsized a little of my possessions, and gave some stuff away. That included a rare set of movie collectibles that I gave to a celebrity that had their own collection. It was worth $5,000 or so, a large amount given I'm on a pension. This wasn't done on a whim. I contacted their agent, they said celebrity would love to have it, etc. So I boxed it all off with a letter, the original receipt, etc. I never received any form of thanks outside a standard fan pack, cap and signed en masse stock photo, the stuff they send to most people that write in. No real indication of thanks. It's not even the value, it's the sheer seemingly not giving a shit. I hope like hell I'm wrong, and said celebrity just lost my address or something. That's why I'm being coy on details, don't want to misjudge the guy. Percent. Can I just add the opposite side though? An interaction that was amazing. I asked Kevin Smith a question when he was in Sydney at a Comic-Con thing. It was quite funny. I basically said I'm a dork and my bucket list has dorky things, like Avengers Infinity War. People judge that and say, "Not Paris. Weirdo, you're a dork, Kevin, how can I deal with this prejudice?" He feigned anger at being called a dork and threatened to kill me. I retorted with, "Well, you've only got a few years to try." Laughs all round. It's great when people can laugh at somewhat serious shit. What's really awesome was Kevin's advice has, in a weird way, helped dozens or more people. It's a bit complicated but here goes. His advice was to record my voice. So I did, and I went on a TV show here in Australia. You can't ask that. From that, I've done a few spoken interview things. What I sometimes discuss is how I had anxiety, depression in the past as well as cancer now. Feel free to Reddit store comments for more info. Anyhow, that gives me a contrast to talk about how severe anxiety can be. I've had dozens of people now comment, either in person or email, Facebook or Reddit, that thank me for helping them understand the severity of anxiety. By being able to compare it to cancer, it gives people the ability to see seriousness of it, to destigmatize it. They thank me for that, but really it was Kevin Smith who put that ball in motion. Edit. Oh shit. I totally forgot Andrew Denton being awesome. I sort of forgot him because I saw him outside Celebrity. For international readers, Denton has had many roles, most being interviewing celebrities. Think David Letterman. But recently Denton has championed euthanasia reform, a topic I'm vested in too. I had, distantly, worked on a book he did about the topic. When he had a chance to see a talk, afterwards he approached me knowing my name straight away, and his first question was how was I going. Now I'm not exactly an incognito individual, but still to know my name and instantly ask about how I was, that was great. I think some people are just super nice. Hugh Grant is a dick. My family went on a trip to Villefranche in France a couple years ago. We were staying at a nice house we rented and just enjoying the great weather and views. We got a call from the guy who owned the place. Apparently he was looking to sell the place and had a prospective buyer that was coming to view the place. Some agent, personal, not real estate, comes in and basically tells us to go so he can have a look around. While we were eating breakfast, being non-dicks and figuring they'd at least say hello and apologize, we left the property for the 5-10 minutes it took them to walk through. Upon exiting the front gate we see Hugh Grant, who immediately turned his back on us. Didn't say hello. Didn't apologize for the intrusion. The least he could have done was wave, or apologized for our displacement and his intrusion on our vacation. But he didn't even dignify us with an acknowledgement. So yeah. Fuck Hugh Grant. Dude's a dick. It doesn't forgive it, but if he had an agent, maybe he was trying to keep his involvement quiet so the seller didn't realize how wealthy the buyer was and up the price on him. Was at a Beach Boys concert and the person in front of me was wearing a big coat and hat, but looked a lot like David Spade. As the show started, this person had snuck in a few flasks and proceeds to get pretty drunk. Ends up it was David Spade. I said hi to him between bands and asked if I could buy him any more to drink, and he just pulled out another flask and said nope, I'm sent. Seemed pretty low-key and just wanted to enjoy some good music at the Greek. This is exactly the way I would hope David Spade would be, if I had ever taken the time to hope David Spade would be away. I was a dealer at the MGM Grand in Vegas and a few other joints, so I had more than a few encounters. The worst was Oscar de la Hoya. He has a thing for underage girls, and on this night he and his buddy had a gaggle of them in tow. So him and his friend are on my game, dice, and there is only room on the rail for one girl to try and squeeze in next to them, and no sooner did one get in than another one would just reach over the top and rip her out by her hair and a new one would squeeze in. This repeated itself over and over again, and De La Hoya and his buddy just laughed and laughed, enjoying every minute of it. Now I know what you're thinking, what are underage girls doing on a game in the casino? Short answer is different rules for celebs. We all wanted to punch those assholes. I dealt to Corey Feldman one night, black nail polish and all, who was so fucked up he was unintelligible and a complete pain in the ass. He literally had to have someone stand behind him to catch him when he nodded out. Same for Arnold Palmer at 10 o'clock in the morning, no less, a few years later at a different casino. Jimmy Connors was a prick, refused to acknowledge anybody and just scowled the entire time he was on the game. Shocking how physically tiny of a man he was also. I enjoyed taking his money very much. MC Hammer was a fucking idiot. We beat the shit out of him on the game one night. He wanted everybody in the joint to know he was there.
kept yelling over and over, "I'm Tyrone Burrell, I'm a VIP, where is so-and-so, get them here right now," etc., etc. His brother was hands down one of the worst gamblers to ever come down the pike, by the way. Louis C.K. wouldn't listen to my advice and missed out on making a nice little score because the table was hot. I might have ran him off the game because my frustration with him was fairly evident, so he left. Suppose I was the dick that time, but in light of recent events, fuck him. I could go on about others, but let's acknowledge some very nice ones instead, such as boxers Roy Jones Jr. and Pernell Sweat P. Whitaker, comedian Dave Attell, basketball players Charles Oakley and Sean Elliott, music exec Berry Gordy and the Jackson family sends Michael and Janet, from football the entire Washington Redskins original Hogs offensive line, from baseball a very drunk and funny Ricky Henderson, and a bunch I'm forgetting as it's been a long while now. The best though, and I'll never forget, was all Louis, Grandpa from the Munsters. He was an old vaudevillian, SP, and did his act for us early one morning. It was hilarious. I went to a Pink concert when I was like 13, maybe 14. My friend, sister and I go to get some snacks and we see some lady at the stands who looks familiar. Turns out it was Allison Hannigan, Lily from How I Met Your Mother. We looked it up and confirmed the guy with her was her husband. We didn't go ask for a picture and didn't plan on it. Suddenly she turns and catches us looking at her and gives us the absolute dirtiest looks. Like full on glaring at us. We hadn't approached her or even taken a picture. She just glared and then walked away. I don't know if it counts as dickish, but I'm pretty disappointed that she glared at kids who weren't even trying to bother her. At South by Southwest a few years ago with a large group of friends. Walking down a quiet side street from whatever the main drag is there, 6th Street, we volley at a cocktail or two. Pass right by Colin Hanks walking with his buddy. I go, holy shit. It's Tom Hanks' son, because I honestly couldn't remember his name in the moment, and my buddies one by one address him as Tom Hanks' son, as in, wow, it is Tom Hanks' son, hi Tom Hanks' son. There's an awkward pause and he blurts out, I have a name, you know. And in all honesty, he could have been messing with us about being angry at how we were addressing him. After another awkward pause, my friend goes with it and says, gee, we're really sorry Tom Hanks' son. And we all burst out laughing as he calls us assholes and walks away. So I guess this was more of a what celebrity did you treat like a dick kind of story. That's really depressing. Colin Hanks is a fantastic actor in his own right and you guys were straight up dicks to him. Tom Hanks has infinity asshole credits. You should fear the day he dies in those get wailed to his son. Was 16, mid-90s. Had a family dinner with me, my dad, my stepmom, Donald Trump, his side piece, and his daughter. Talked to him for a bit, he told me I would never be good enough to fuck his daughter. Shortly after, very embarrassed by the whole thing, she left. Trump spent the rest of the dinner talking himself up and putting our family down. Numerous comparisons to his side piece being much more beautiful than my stepmom.